Trying to get to the point where we have actionable data on a regular basis that helps us understand what our students' lives are like and what we can do internally to improve their experience.
Data informed it's more innovative. So you're looking at the data, but then you peel it apart and you kind of get the context, and it just becomes a piece of what you use to make your decisions.
How might we meet community needs when the data are typically delayed?
Kind of the impetus. So I started a company called Drive IT back in the day. And we started a technical data literacy learning track where we would it was targeted at business people, like in the finance team or the marketing team. And we kind of walked them through data structures and analysis and advanced Excel and started getting them into the basics of data visualization. Because what we wanted the business people to do was to be able to go to that data source that Terry sets up and be able to import some data and build their own basic visualizations. And we were calling that data literacy. And then what we found out when we started talking to companies is they were like, we can't even do that because our people don't even understand like the foundation of why data is important. So this and some other materials that we've been creating are kind of up a level. They're non-technical, just kind of building the culture and the knowledge around data. And now we're calling this data literacy, and we're starting to call the other one like intro to data visualization. But it is really fascinating to watch organizations kind of come to terms with their data needs. And I've started to think that the day is coming where, like, 10, 15 years ago, if you walked into a company and said, I don't really know how to type, or I don't know how to use the internet, they would laugh at you. And I think the day is coming where if you're a business professional, a white collar professional, and you walk into a company and you say, I don't understand how to use and leverage data, you are going to be laughed out of the interview. We're not here yet, but probably in the next 10 to 15 years. So, but thank you. I was trying to go through the group chat, but
let me jump in. Yeah, let me jump in here real quick, Eric, since we've got Terry King, Todd, and Lana all here on board. Northwest State has all the essential elements that you talked about for a data-driven culture. We have got fantastic leadership. We have got a very deep IT and data collection. So with Todd and Lana, how do you think our data use is going to change now with this response to COVID, where maybe our students our population might be a little bit more fragile? Are we going to be able to use some of this data, the survey information, to help build our retention? Or are we going to be looking at data differently now that the COVID response is coming in?
I'll let Todd chime in here in a second, but I will tell you, like, one of the things that is super important is better understanding from our students' perspective what's going on in their life. And, we've tried to engage in survey research, and I will say, shout out to Mike Vanderpool, but the whole design-centered thinking really shapes what we do. And I think it captures our need to find out firsthand from our students what they're experiencing, and then what we can change in our environment to help them overall so they do persist. So I think I see us using data more frequently in a much faster way, and really collecting it from the source, and that's the student, as well as looking at environmental factors, but really trying to get to the point where we have actionable data on a regular basis that helps us understand what our students' lives are like and what we can do internally to improve their experience.
I'll start by saying, Eric, I'm sorry I missed your presentation. It sounded like it was really good.
Sure. I'm sure there'll be a video.
Yeah, it's recorded as long as he'll let us share it.
Okay. Okay. Everything Lana said's correct. I'll say even, last year, maybe even a little before that, we, as an organization, we moved to a data-informed decision making, which is a little bit different than data-driven. Data-driven is, the data is the holy grail, and you go do what the data says. Data-informed is, it's more innovative. So you're looking at the data, but then you peel it apart, and you kind of get the context, and it just becomes a piece of what you use to make your decisions. And I think we started that last year, but COVID, I mean, it entirely just accelerated the pace at which we moved to that sort of culture. If you think about it, the president came back from one meeting. 2 days later, he says, we're closing the campus. 3 days later, the faculty and staff are all remote learning. That was, there was data informed. We had specific conversations with the governor to kind of what he was thinking, but then we looked at our students as well, and how do we keep our staff and students safe yet continue to move forward? And there are lots of examples of decisions that we've made that weren't based solely on data, but data certainly was part of that decision.
Yeah, I would tell you too, trying to connect the dots in terms of as learners transition to the remote environment, we counted on faculty to let us know if a student had dropped off of contact. And then advisors would immediately jump in. So as that data was coming in from faculty, our advisors were reaching out to retain that student. So to me, that's a good example of sharing information in ways where we can be responsive and act on it.
I think as a faculty member, one of the things that, and thinking about retention and helping the learner, in the face-to-face environment, and a little bit of reading people's faces and body language will tell you a whole bunch of stuff about what they're dealing with outside of class, or potentially dealing with outside of class, right? As we go more remote, you lose that. But if data can tell target when somebody's pregnant and they don't know it, the data, we should be able to find a way to collect some data that would be able to tell us when our students might be close to a point where we need some type of intervention. That's what I'd be looking for as a faculty member, as we talk about personalized learning and being able to support more individuals. Like, how can the data inform me when I should intervene?
Yeah, I think, we've always used quantitative data, in my perspective, from that's surface level. That'll tell you what may be going on, but, then you need to uncover what's really going on beneath that. And I think that's where qualitative data are extremely helpful too. It adds meat to the bones, if you will, and helps you develop a more informed strategy to support students.
Yeah, one of the things I find interesting is they now have machine learning systems that go through corporate filings, and they specifically read the statement from the CEO, and it does language analysis on the statement from the CEO to determine if he's lying, because they can detect negativity and stuff in the words. And I always thought, from an education perspective, that would be interesting to put on your forum, your class forum. Like, could I detect which students are frustrated just by the language that they're using?
Yeah.
I've got, yes, absolutely. And after, I guess this will be year 30 for me. After 30 years of teaching, I have multiple cases where I can tell you I read text samples from students and immediately found the department to send them to, up to and including a lovely seminar I had on finding schizophrenia and the early signs of it in a composition class.
Nice.
So is anybody out there, part of this whole summit that we're having is sharing of stories and information. I guess during the response to COVID, I know we sent out surveys. Alex at Hilltop, Dustin Mays at Liberty Center, you were sending out surveys of kind of assessing technology. I'm guessing, K-12, maybe your IT department had a little bit more control on that, but I mean, what information is out there that we may not be aware of, or what information is there that we might be able to connect into other places? So interested in hearing from other people how they responded to this, trying to collect and use information / data. I don't know which word I'm supposed to use, Keith. Is it information or data?
It's information when it's useful.
So anybody out there want to contribute? It's just like the classroom, isn't it? Should we send everybody into breakout rooms? Do you want to test the breakout room feature?
Sure, why not?
Let's do that. We're going to go, and here's the deal. Let's spend about 10 minutes. This will be a small breakout room. So again, part of what we're doing with this virtual summit is kind of showing off some of the tools and things as we go. And there's a mass exodus of people leaving now because they don't want to go into breakout rooms. But we'll do some breakout rooms. And I think what we want to do is it'll be 4 or 5 people per room. And let's go ahead and find somebody in that room to be the reporter. Introduce yourselves, spend a few minutes talking, getting to know each other, but then also talk about maybe some of the questions you have regarding data, and then the reporter from that group bring that back to us and share. And then Eric, Todd, Lana, Keith, Terry, anybody and everybody can then maybe kind of have a conversation around those questions. So we'll spend maybe 5 to 10 minutes doing that. I'll pop in and check in on your rooms to see how things are going. Is that cool?
Right. So reminder, right? Each group all you have to do is come up with one question to ask afterwards. That's it.
Fabulous.
Right.
And we'll see how this whole thing works. So breakout rooms in Zoom are pretty cool. I've used it in the classroom. It's similar to sending out groups to the corner of the room to work on something. So all the features are the exact same with turning your mic on and off, video on and off, same type of thing. I think the chat function for each breakout room, if you don't have access to any of that stuff, you can do it. You can do it there, and we'll test this and see how it works. So we're going to break out into 7 rooms. This will be automatic. It's going to create rooms. You'll get an invitation, and it will call you into that room. I think you press the button, you'll end up showing up in that room. We'll see how this goes, everybody. Cool? Sweet. And hey, everybody. Can you hear me? Alan, can you give me a thumbs up? Somebody? Sweet, sweet, sweet. Todd and Wise, really good questions and conversations going on in the breakout rooms. I checked them out, so it was really nice. We should have some good conversation. I'm gonna bring everybody back here in just a couple minutes, and then we'll let people share their questions. So, Wise, you good? Sweet, sweet. So we're back. We're gonna do a hard stop at 10:55, so we can prep for give Wise some time to get ready for his next session at 11. Is going to be about data visualization, which I think is the logical extension of all this, right? And that'll be awesome. So right now, just real quick, the breakout rooms. I popped into each and every one. It seemed like it worked well. People with their cameras on sharing. I think pedagogically, this will be something we talk about on Wednesday with remote instruction, right? The larger rooms tend to be intimidating, but when we shrink down and use those breakout rooms, people seem to feel more comfortable sharing. I've seen that in my own classrooms, and we just demonstrated that here now. So awesome. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. If you want to go ahead and put your questions either in the chat or use the raise your hand feature, or, we've got a small enough group, we can I'll go ahead. I think we'll start with group number 1. If you want to throw your question in the chat or verbalize it here, either way, what was the question that came out of breakout group 1? Maybe you don't know your numbers, but.
Yeah, I think we were 1. It was Robin Reynolds and Jaden Thomas and myself. And we talked a little bit about how our main question was, how might we meet community needs when the data are typically delayed? Everybody's circumstances change very frequently, but like unemployment information or labor market information, those data are delayed. So how do we respond promptly with creative solutions when some of our data are delayed.
Wise, do you have the answer to that?
I was gonna say, what's the format for answering?
With just anybody that's got something to contribute. I mean, I think we're doing well enough not talking over each other. So if you have something to contribute, just feel free.
So some of it can be that data partnership, that partnership with the local and state levels, getting access to the raw sources of data before they're released can be something if you have an information partnership. I heard you guys mention surveys earlier. I mean, you can always try to collect your own information. But the government data being delayed is usually that is definitely challenging. But I would suggest starting with information sharing, just being like, hey, can we get to the data as it come in? Can we get a direct feed? Or at least encourage the government to provide a feed from their unemployment office and things like that.
And then, Lana, you had a follow-up question or another question. How do we identify creative and responsive solutions to community stakeholder needs? That is your question. Sorry.
Yeah, I
just
just posted in the chat. And maybe the meetings with like community leaders would, follow through. That would tell us more about what they're seeing on a more dynamic basis. Jaden was just describing some of what he learns in his role as a CCMEP. And it is, he gets information and then he needs to act on that, but you also want to monitor what's going on in the community. And then, Eric's point to kind of sharing data more widely on a more current basis would help us do these.
Yeah. And, are there new sources of data? Can you get data from food banks? Can you get data from local churches? Can you get data, even from psychiatric treatment facilities? Because you usually get anxiety and things like that, and people go seek treatment. If you see a spike in people seeking therapists and things, there's probably something going on.
Mm-hmm.
Is potentially relying on a smaller data set or smaller data sample an option? I know you don't want to build a huge strategic plan across with limited data, but can you reach out into the community and get small sets of data and get ideas and themes?
Absolutely. If you're asking the right questions, representative samples are representative. So, the thing with smaller sets is you just have to be really careful about bias. So you just have to really go through that thought process about bias.
I mean, can you define that for us a little bit? Just data bias in general, the Cliff Notes version of it.
Yeah. So, okay, a stupid obvious, like nobody would ever be this dumb, but I mean, you might run an experiment if you're a hotel operator. You might run an experiment during peak season, and then you're basing decisions based on peak season data and ignoring non-peak season when you have less customers and things like that. And then you're perplexed why the thing didn't work year round.
Right.
So, seasonality is a bias that you need to consider in data.
Gotcha.
Right. And sometimes it's who you talk to, right? Because it's like, hey, let's go talk to the people. Let's interview folks. But you just you only talk to your friends, right? Or the people that are easy to talk to. You're going to get a bias sample that probably everything is okay, right?
Yeah.
Whereas you have to work harder to find the people that, or the reverse happens. If you're a business, it's often easy to find the complainers, in which case you're now biased towards bad customers and you're not serving the good customers well.
Your reviews are always a really good source of bias because you're either really, really happy or you're pissed off.
Right.
to take the time to leave a review.
And
You can be biased by cherry picking the data you want, to support your theory or to disprove.
Or here's my own data bias flub, right? We sent out that survey to learner population regarding how, and I think I had a question in there about how often they check email. Well, the survey was sent through email. So obviously the people who don't check their email were not part of the responses. Skewed so bias will skew the data in some way, shape, or form. Correct? Sweet.
We have a whole data bias section in some of our training, which goes into, there's like, I don't know, there's like 30 different types of bias that are recognized.
Brad's got a question here in the chat, and I'm going to use the chat because that's temporal and we'll scroll away. I'll look there first. So how can we share data or information effectively? We all have our own spreadsheets. You know, they're not shareable. I think some of us have Excel, some of us are using Google Docs. Is there a convention for storing data that could help increase this efficiency? You know, Wise, Terry, Todd, anybody, feel free to speak on that, or anybody in the audience if you've got some experience or thoughts.
Well, can I effectively share a spreadsheet? Not really. I mean, yeah, you can query them. You can build automated processes to scrape them and things
Pivot
like
tables
that.
and
I guess this is a good question, because one of the things when I'm doing my data literacy training, you know, a lot of department heads, they get really wide-eyed and they're like, do I have to give up my spreadsheets? And it's like, no, you don't have to give up your spreadsheet, but there needs to be an inflection point where you say, this spreadsheet is critical to our process and decision making. And that's when you need to promote it to the greater organization. It's fine to run experiments and do things in your silo and do that. But there is a point where you say, yes, this works. It's part of our process. It's part of our organizational DNA, and we rely on it. And that's when you kick it up to Terry's team and say, hey, we need to take this to the next level.
And I think, Todd, that speaks to about like how data can drive innovation. The freedom to experiment and do things in some of those spreadsheets then becomes less cumbersome because it doesn't have to be part of the larger thing that's going to require signatures and stuff like that to change.
Yeah. And usually I tell department heads the inflection point is when, you know, I say, if I took this away from you, how pissed off would your team be? And when the answer is very pissed, it needs to be promoted to the organization.
Enough time and energy, you can create that visualization, right? I mean, it's just, you have to, I think, and Eric, you're probably closer to this, but when I left the private sector, companies were just starting to realize that they had to employ a full-time data person, because it's like a piece of machinery, right? You don't buy a car and then never work on it again. You have to upkeep, you have to do them. So building a data warehouse, you don't just build it and it's done. I mean, you're constantly collecting new information, you're aggregating in different ways. So depending on the size of the organization, it doesn't have to be that big. It's a full-time job to create and maintain a data warehouse.
So and what we're seeing with our data literacy and you know, data engineering training, you know, particularly I go back to the shipping company, which is one you all know. What they're doing is they're doing data literacy across their entire organization. And then when they go into a marketing team or a finance team and they give them this data literacy training, there are some people that really like it and they really gravitate toward it, and they show a talent for it. And they basically started calling those people data champions. And they give them additional visualization and analytics training, because what they want to have is a data champion in every organizational unit on every team. So there will be somebody on your team who is responsible for that team's data, the consumption, and they're kind of the ones making that call with the spreadsheets and stuff, where they say, okay, you know, this works, this is clean, this is the way we like it. Let's go get the data team involved and promote this to the organization. You kind of need to have boots on the ground, you know, at scale to make this work.
Brad, you had raised your hand. Did you have a follow-up to your question?
Right. So Eric, when you're talking about the data sharing, how does that ball get rolling? How would Northwest State, for example, share data with Defiance County or Cincinnati State or Zane State? How does this get started? Because data is, you know, very protected by all of us because we work hard to get it. It's expensive.
Mm-hmm. Usually it's people like you. It's the leadership level. You know, you guys on occasion will have an excuse to meet each other at events or things like that. And a lot of this stuff happens organically with the community. You start having conversations and you start openly talking about the data you have and the challenges you face. And you'll often find that people be like, oh, we have data like that. Oh, well, okay, maybe we should share. Let's have our nerds get together with your nerds, and let's have a conversation about how to open that stuff up. So unfortunate. I mean, it's a fortunate and unfortunate answer. It's fortunate because it's fun if you like going out there and meeting with people and connecting. Unfortunately, there's no systemized place to go and do that, to advertise your data and your willingness to share that data. But I would just take advantage. I would just order your leadership team, your executive team, to get out there, and when they're talking to people, specifically bring up data and your interest in partnering on data, and you'll be surprised what kind of conversations start happening. There's also a lot of data conferences popping up now. Well, I mean, they're virtual now, but even so, it's a human connection right now, I guess, is the short answer.
Brian, did you have something to share? Brian, is it Bach? I see you turned your camera on there. You're muted.
I apologize. No, I was just adjusting my camera.
Well, hello and welcome.
My bad.
It's all good. It's all good. Kara, what about you? Kara, what about you? How's the newborn?
Sleeping.
Awesome.
Pretty good.
Awesome. Alan, you brought up a question in group 7. It's over in the chat. And again, I think this is a bigger conversation. Can we use data to improve our student early warning system? Right now, it's largely based on anecdotal, right? Instructor kind of observation, or in Comp 1, there might be a little something going on that not a real big deal, but maybe that same student is having an issue over in 1 or 2 other classes. That together, that would be a great indicator if we could find a way to
coordinate that. Yeah. The other thing data might help us with is finding out the best practices for contacting students too. What combination of communication actually has the highest probability of getting to our people and actually getting them to come back or start participating or get the help they need, whatever.
Yes, so again, and I guess why is just broad terms, if you start to try to design something like that, where do you even start?
Well, you guys are probably beholden to an LMS of some kind. So you probably have to start with the LMS vendor and be having conversations with them about what you want to track and what your goals are. And oftentimes, especially with the larger LMS, the data might actually already be there. It's just, I don't know a lot of universities that are effectively using all of the data that's available to them in their LMS systems.
Yeah, even Canvas, right? It gives you some dashboard dial type things, but it's not really anything, doesn't feel actionable. I should say it feels more like it's too broad to be actionable in the moment with a student. It might be continuous improvement for a course or something, but not necessarily for individuals. There's no warning that would pop up in an LMS that I've ever seen yet that, hey, this student needs attention or you should check in on them.
Yeah, I mean, on a personal note, I was incredibly frustrated with my kid's school because he actually developed generalized anxiety. And, we didn't know yet, he wasn't diagnosed yet, but, in his school data, he started where he had always turned in everything and gotten good grades, like he started not turning in his homework. But as a parent, I didn't know because the grade book's delayed, there's a time lapse and everything. And even then, because he was still doing well on the tests, his grades were dropping, but they weren't dropping to a point where I was really concerned. But then once he got diagnosed and I started going back and looking for patterns in his life, there was a pattern there.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody missed it.
So smaller organizations, what we've done is we've found strategic partners, right? So not necessarily for the helping the students, but for recruitment, we partner with the EAB, and they have a collection of best practices on how to reach potential students, how to recruit them. how to put processes in place that are student focused. So getting the data on how to serve that population, we enlisted a partner in doing that. And we've done the same thing with Signify is another vendor partner that we've engaged. They have this huge library of these are the best practices in your communications with students when it comes to recruitment and retention. So, you know, we're not having to collect the data. We've partnered with vendors who have the data and have all the best practices, and they're just helping us implement that.
Nice.
Once we get up and running with them, we'll start collecting localized data to see how well it matches with, you know, their larger data set. But I imagine there's got to be a partner out there that could come and help us discuss the early warning system and what are the best practices, how do we reach those students, how do we identify them earlier, so that it's not solely reliant upon the instructor to notice a pattern and report it.
And kind of one of my personal things about, you know, when you talk about organizational maturity with data, you know, that I ask is, how quickly can you detect a change? Because you know, the more advanced you are with data in your organization, the faster you are at detecting those changes. So like with my son, I mean, there was a behavior change. He stopped turning in his homework. You know, how quickly does that get flagged? How quickly does that move through the system to where an action is taken? So.
I think one of the things that's been interesting as you know, in my prior role as dean, it's super important to stay in touch with the other service offices so that you can tell, okay, are you hearing even the like bookstore and food service, because they can tell you what's the buzz among students. And that's much more dynamic than it is a survey. So being out and among all of your learner populations and collecting anecdotal data from those areas that work with our students in, you know, food service and bookstore and the like, that helps us identify where we may need to reach out. Like, we don't want our learners to be anonymous. We want to know them. We want to support them. We don't want them to disappear. And it's our responsibility to attend to them and pay attention.
Yeah, it just brought up an interesting point in my mind. I mean, if your campus is completely connected with its data sources and you're focused on the well-being of your students, can you detect changes in their workout pattern? Are they using the rec center? Did they stop using the rec center? Can you detect changes in their eating habits? Are they eating more? Are they eating less in a significant manner? You know, those could all be, you know, potential flags if you paired that with a change in their academic performance. You know.
Terry and Dan, you were in a group. What question did you come up with, or comment, concern, anything to share from your group?
We didn't come up with a question per se, but as I've been listening here, one of the things we launched last year was we at North Central started with Aviso Engage, which if your full faculty body is using Canvas fully, does have some functionality to start issuing those early alerts. We're starting to see, as more and more of our faculty members and adjunct are becoming better users of Canvas and multiple points of contact, the system is able to send out to the individual advisors and our advising staff if somebody stops showing up, if somebody stops interacting with the LMS for more than, I think they have it set right now as a trial for 5 days. We're starting to get that, hey, you might want to reach out this individual or these 25 individuals, if it's more of an area advisor, are able to go after these people that are starting to be flagged as high risk. It's not perfect at this point. We're still building, we're still cleaning out, you know, bad entries that were carryover from old systems, but it's a start.
And is that Envisio.com, ENVISIO?
Aviso, it's AV, hold on a second.
Yeah, because some of the things that get mentioned, we're sharing via Flipboard. There's a Flipboard link that I'll share and some resources after the fact, but it's also aggregating to inside of a Slack channel as well. So I'd like to be able to share that.
AVISO.
.com.io. You never can tell anymore.
I have no idea what their webpage is. It's now fully integrated into our, when I log in, it shows up.
Awesome. I'll find it.
Looks like .com, Vanderpool.
Thank you very much, Alex. Appreciate that. What other groups and questions were out there or stories to share about data? Got two or three other groups, right? Amy, did your group go? Or did Amy leave us? I think Amy left us. We could, I mean, since we burned through, you know, kind of the break between session 1 and 2 today, we could cut this one a little short, and unless anybody has anything that they want to contribute. Again, we'll come back at 1, and Wise, you're going to do a presentation on data visualization for us.
At 11, you mean?
Oh yeah, 11. Thank you. Depends. 11 EST. Thank you. 11 Eastern Standard Time Zone. I'm going to make sure I get more sleep tonight than I did last night. Couldn't sleep last night, and I'm paying for it this morning.
Except for daylight time, not standard.
Oh, geez. I'm just going to stop talking. Keith, can you run the rest of the day for us, please? Alan, what about you? You want to run the rest of the day?
No.
Thank you. All right. If nobody has anything else, this room will stay open, the same room at 11 o'clock in 9 minutes from now. And Wise will be doing a presentation on data visualization. But I think this morning's going so far so good for everybody. Cool. See you back in 10 minutes.